Tonight we're going to start Snow White. One winter day, when snowflakes were falling, a queen sat at her open bedroom window, sewing a tapestry on a frame made of black ebony. She accidentally pricked her finger with the needle, and 3 drops of blood fell upon the snow. The red drops looked so beautiful against the white snow that she said, "I wish I might have a child, as white as snow, as red as blood, and as black as ebony." A year later, her wish came true. The queen gave birth to a daughter whose skin was white as snow, whose cheeks were red as blood, and whose hair was black as ebony. The queen named the child Snow White. But the queen died, and a year passed before the king took a second wife. This new queen was very beautiful, but she was also very proud. She could not bear to think that anyone might be as beautiful as she. Now this queen's most prized possession, means her favorite thing that she has, was a magic mirror. Every day she stepped in front of it to look at herself and say, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of them all?" And the mirror would always reply, "Fair queen, you are the fairest of them all." These words made the proud queen very happy, and she knew the mirror would speak only the truth. As time passed, Snow White grew up. Every day the girl became more beautiful. One morning, when the queen stepped in front of her mirror and asked, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of them all?" the mirror replied, "Queen, you are very fair, 'tis true, but Snow White is 1,000 times fairer than you." When the queen heard that, she turned pale, means white, with rage and envy. She's jealous. From that moment on, she could not think of Snow White without feeling a bitter pang in her heart. Day by day, her hatred grew until it gave her no peace. At last, she called her huntsman to her and said, "Take the child deep into the forest, for I never want to see her again. Kill her, and bring me her heart, so I will know that you have done as I commanded." The huntsman led Snow White deep into the forest, but when he drew his knife, she began to cry. "I will run away into the forest," she pleaded. "I promise I will never come home again. Please spare me my life." She was so innocent that the huntsman could not help but take pity on her, and he told her to run away. "It will not be long before the wild beasts devour her," he thought, "but at least she will not die from my hand." The huntsman killed a wild boar, cut out its heart, and took it back to the queen. The wicked woman...
Daddy, does a heart actually look like a heart?
No.
Or do
No.
they just make
Right.
the heart look like it because it's the same word?
Well, yeah, it's the same word, and it's supposed to symbolize a real heart, like in our body, but the heart in our body looks much different than the paper heart or the heart we draw. I'll show you a picture of a heart.
That's why they always make the hearts red.
Right. I'll show you a picture of a real heart tomorrow. The huntsman killed a wild boar, cut out its heart, and took it back to the queen. The wicked woman ate it, rejoicing that Snow White was dead. That's pretty sick, yeah. Good grief. That's pretty much cannibalism, right?
Yeah.
Alright, but nobody said she was normal. Meanwhile, Snow White found herself alone in the great, dark, snowy forest. She stared...
Daddy, are they talking about like giants or like wolves and bears?
They're talking about wolves and bears. You mean the wild beasts, yeah. She stared up at the branches on the trees and wondered...
Is Daddy a bunch magic stories say, like wild beasts, like giant monsters.
That's true, but not in this story. You're right. What would become of her? As night began to fall, she grew afraid and ran through the forest, over sharp stones and past thorny brambles. Wild beasts sprang at her, but she came to no harm. At last she spied lights shining through the trees and followed them. She came upon a tiny cottage. Inside, everything was unusually small and wonderfully clean and neat. There was a little long table covered with a clean white cloth. It was set with 7 little plates, spoons, knives, and cups. Against one wall stood 7 little beds, all in a row, covered with snow-white sheets. Snow White was very hungry and thirsty, so she ate 1 bite of bread from each plate and took 1 sip of wine from each cup, for she did not want to take everything from one setting. Then, wearily, she lay down on one of the beds and fell fast asleep. Later that night, the owners of the cottage came marching in. They were 7 dwarfs who spent their days digging in the mountains for gold. They saw at once that someone had been in their cottage, and there she was, asleep on one of their beds. "How beautiful she is!" they all cried at once. They were so touched by the child's beauty that they could not bring themselves to wake her. The next day, when Snow White awoke, she saw the 7 dwarfs standing around her bed. At first she was frightened, but they greeted her kindly. "What is your name?" one of them asked. "Snow White," she replied. The dwarfs asked her how she came to be in their cottage. She told them how her stepmother had ordered a huntsman to take her into the forest and kill her, and how he had spared her life, and how she had run away into the woods. When the dwarfs heard all this, they said, "If you wish, you may stay with us and keep our house. You can cook, make the beds, and wash our dishes. And if you keep everything neat and clean, we will take good care of you." "Oh, I would like that," Snow White smiled. So every morning the 7 dwarfs went off to the mountains to dig for gold, and Snow White waved goodbye to them from the cottage door. When the dwarfs returned, each evening Snow White had cleaned the cottage and fixed a wonderful supper. Since Snow White spent her days alone in the cottage, the dwarfs warned her to beware of her stepmother. "Be careful and do not let anyone in," they told her. "Your stepmother will soon find out where you are and come after you." Believing that she had eaten Snow White's heart, the wicked queen had not bothered to look into her magic mirror, but at that very moment she decided to step in front of it and ask, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of them all?" And the mirror replied, "Queen, you are very fair, 'tis true, but over the mountains and through the woods, in the cottage where the 7 dwarfs stay, Snow White is 1,000 times more fair." When she heard that, the queen was livid. So mad. Her mirror would never lie to her. She knew that the huntsman had deceived her, and Snow White was still alive. Late into the night she schemed, and she thought about ways how she might kill the child so that she would once again be the most beautiful in the land. At last she came up with a plan. She smeared her face with brown paint and dressed herself in the clothes of an old peddler. Disguised this way, she headed out over the mountains and through the forest to the cottage of the 7 dwarfs. "Fine wares for sale," she cried beneath the cottage window until Snow White peered out. "Good day, my good woman," Snow White said. "What do you have?" "Laces of all colors," murmured the wicked queen. "Have a look." She held out a brightly colored silk lace. "Surely I can let in this old peddler," Snow White thought. She opened the door and took the pretty lace. Ah.
Who's a
Ah.
lace?
Pretty lace. Lace can be like for, the lace in your shoe, but for this kind of lace, it's like a
Belt?
no, it's like a special pattern of fabric that looks almost like snowflakes all together. Lace. I'll show you. Yeah, I'll show you sometime. It's a fancy type of cloth. Ah, come here and let me lace you properly, said the queen. Snow White obediently turned around to let the peddler tie the lace in her belt. The queen laced her up so quickly and so tightly that Snow White could not breathe, and she fell to the ground in a faint. Oh, so it says the peddler tied the lace in her belt. Let the peddler tie the lace around in her belt. So the lace might be a special like shoestring type thing that takes her belt and squeezes it on her back. So it like squeezed, because a long time ago their belt, it was, some ladies wore a sort of a belt that went kind of up towards their ribs, all the way from down here all the way up to here, and they'd tighten it with a lace on the back, really tight, so that they'd have a funny shape, right? They thought it made them look more beautiful. And so if it was laced up too tight, it means their lungs can't contract and expand properly, and she passed out. And if somebody doesn't cut those laces or, untie that, she's in big trouble. She needs air. All right. Now it is over for you, my pretty one, the queen sneered and hurried back to her palace. When the 7 dwarfs returned that evening, they found their beautiful Snow White lying still and pale on the floor. When they lifted her up, they could see that her belt had been laced too tightly. Quickly they undid the lace, and little by little Snow White began to breathe again. When she was able to speak, she told the dwarfs what had happened. The peddler was your wicked stepmother, they told her. Now you know you must be even more on guard and let no one in the cottage when we are away. As soon as the wicked queen was home, she rushed to her mirror and asked, Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of them all? And the mirror replied, Queen, you are very fair, 'tis true, but over the mountains and through the woods, in the cottage where the 7 dwarfs are, Snow White is 1,000 times fairer than you. When the queen heard that, her heart beat as if it would burst, for she knew that Snow White was still alive. All that night and the next day, the queen thought long and hard to devise a better plan to kill her rival. She finally decided to make a poisoned comb. Disguising herself as another old peddler, she set out for the 7 dwarfs' cottage. When she arrived, she knocked on the door and cried out, Beautiful combs for sale! Snow White peered out the window. You had better go on your way, good woman, she said. I may not let anyone in. But you can at least look, can't you? The wicked queen said, holding out the poisoned comb. It glinted so prettily in the light that Snow White couldn't help herself. She opened the door and let the woman in. When the girl had agreed to buy the comb, the peddler said, Now let me place the comb properly in your hair. Snow White, suspecting nothing, bent her head over. But as soon as the comb was in her hair, the poison began to work, and she fell down as if dead. Ha! Now your beauty is nothing, cried the wicked queen, and with that she returned to her palace. The sun was setting when the 7 dwarfs came marching home. Horrified, they found Snow White lying as if dead on the cottage floor. They knew at once it was the wicked queen's doing. Terribly afraid, They examined her carefully and found the poisoned comb. They pulled it from her hair, and within a moment Snow White began to breathe again. When she told them what had happened, they warned her even more strongly that she must be more careful and not open the door to anyone. Meanwhile, back in her chamber, the wicked queen stepped before her magic mirror and said, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of them all?" And it replied, as it had before, "Queen, you are very fair, 'tis true, but over the mountain and through the woods, at the cottage where the 7 dwarfs dwell, Snow White is 1,000 times more fair than you." When she heard that, the queen couldn't contain her rage. Shaking violently and stamping her foot, she swore that she would find a way to kill Snow White. This time, she went into a secret room in the heart of the palace, and there she prepared a poisoned apple. This rosy apple looked so fresh that whoever saw it could not help but crave a bite. When her work was done, the wicked queen disguised herself as an old farm woman and set out once more for the cottage of the 7 dwarfs. When she arrived at the cottage, Snow White said to her firmly, "You had best be on your way, my good woman. The 7 dwarfs had forbid me to let anyone in." "But you need not open the door," the wicked queen told her. "I only wish to sell my apples. Here, let me give you one." "No, thank you," Snow White replied. "I dare not take it." "What are you afraid of?" asked the wicked queen. "You don't think I'd poison you, do you? Look, I share the apple with you. I'll have one half, and you the other." However, the wicked queen had made the apple with such skill that only one half was poisoned. When Snow White saw the farm woman bite into the beautiful apple, her mouth began to water. She put out her hand and accepted the poisoned half, but no sooner had she taken the first bite than she fell to the ground dead. The wicked queen began to laugh. "White as snow, red as blood, and black as ebony," she crooned. "This time even the 7 dwarfs cannot save you." At home again before her mirror, she asked, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of them all?" And the mirror replied, "Queen, there is no one as fair as you." The queen smiled and was at peace, as much at peace as a jealous heart can ever be. When the dwarfs came home that evening, they found Snow White dead and cold. They held a mirror to her lips, but no breath fogged the glass. They lifted her up and searched her for a poisoned object. They unlaced her stays and combed her hair, and even washed her face with water and wine, but nothing they did would bring her back to life. She was truly dead. At last the dwarfs lay Snow White out on a bier of sweet wood. For 3 days they stood around her and wept. When it was time to bury her, they could not bring themselves to lay her on the cold ground. She still looked as if she were alive, with her skin white as snow and her cheeks red as blood and her hair black as ebony. Instead, the 7 dwarfs made beautiful Snow White a coffin of glass, so that she could still be seen by all the living creatures of the world. When it was finished, they gently... Sorry, I was looking at that. When it was finished, they gently laid her inside. Across the top they engraved her name in gold letters and wrote that she was the daughter of a king. Then they carried the glass coffin up to the mountain, and one of them always kept watch over it. For many years Snow White lay in the glass coffin, yet strangely she remained as fresh and lovely as if she were still alive. One day a king's son chanced upon the 7 dwarfs' cottage. Looking up the mountain, he saw the glass coffin glittering in the sun, and he rode up to have a look at it. When he saw the beautiful Snow White, and read the gold letters. He went to the dwarves and said, "Please, let me have the maiden in the glass coffin. I will give you whatever you ask for her." But the dwarves refused. "We would not give her up for all the gold and jewels in the world," they said. "Then give her to me as a present," pleaded the prince, "for I cannot live without looking on her. I promise to love her and cherish her as the person dearest in the world to me." When he said that, the 7 dwarves took pity on him and agreed that he could take Snow White. The prince ordered his servants to lift the coffin onto their shoulders and carry it to his palace. On the way, one of the servants tripped over a thorny bramble and let the coffin fall to the ground, where it broke open. At that, the piece of poisoned apple flew out of Snow White's throat, and with a start, she opened her eyes. "Where am I?" she gasped, sitting up. The prince replied with joy, "You are with me, and here I wish you to stay forever." He told her what had happened and who he was. Then he asked her to be his wife and come and live with him in his father's castle. Snow White, who had fallen in love with the kind prince on sight, gave him her hand. Their wedding feast was soon announced, and the wicked stepmother was invited to the celebration. Little did she know that it was Snow White's wedding she was dressing for in her finest gown of gold and silver. Before she left, she stepped in front of her magic mirror and asked, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of them all?" And the mirror replied, "Queen, you are very fair, 'tis true, but the young princess is 1,000 times fairer than you." When the wicked queen heard that, a chill passed through her. She was terribly afraid. She did not even want to attend the wedding. In the end, she could not stay away. She would have no peace until she had seen this young queen, whom her magic mirror had declared the most beautiful of all. When she arrived at the prince's palace, she recognized Snow White at once. As she set eyes on the girl, all the hate in her evil heart swelled until, in a fit of passion, it burst, and she fell down dead. With no one to wish them harm in the world, Snow White and her prince lived happily ever after. Yeah, happily ever after.
And from the other?
They're still there today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For all I know, they're still there today, like the 3 Billy Goats gruff.
And what town musicians?
Oh, yeah.
Town musicians.
Right. In the robber's house.
Yeah, I think they're still there today.
Alright, and tomorrow night we'll have Rumpelstiltskin.
That one's a fun one. I've never heard this one before.
And so tonight you're going to go night-night, and tomorrow morning you have school.
No. Afternoon.
Oh, you in the afternoon, Puppy in, late morning, 10 o'clock.
Me at 10?
Yep. En Escuela Excelencia Kawita.
Me?
This is your
When?
this is your last full week of Costa Rica school.
When?